Greetings, students, and welcome to this episode and this edition of The Professor Travel. I am The Professor Travel. Again, the purpose of this channel is to learn about destinations together, to discuss more, to travel to different new locations together, and ultimately to enjoy those journeys together. You can always find me on my website at theprofessortravel.com. You can also find me on YouTube at the same location at The Professor Travel. Facebook, I'm also available at The Professor Travel. On Twitter, I'm found at The Professor TR1. And then on Blogspot, if you're a blogger, you can find me at theprofessortravel.blogspot.com. Today, I am so excited. I get to speak with one of my favorite people in the whole world. Our visiting professor today is Professor Keana Albert. Professor, why don't you say hi to the students?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. We've been trying to get together for a little while now, and she's so busy because she's doing some stuff with school right now. So talk to us a little bit about your educational background as well as some of the travel destinations you've been to.
Sure. Okay, I'm a senior biology student at Misericordia University in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I've done quite a bit of travel in the last 2 years, mainly through study abroad and service trips. Some of the places I've been are Ireland, London, I went to Paris, as well as Austria, Hungary, and Belize.
Oh, that's such a fantastic grouping of places to go. So you basically got all over the map at this point.
Doing pretty well, yeah.
Doing all of this within 2 years seems like sometimes that could be a little impacted. With the study abroad programs that you've been in, has it been relatively manageable, especially with your school schedule?
Yeah, it's been really well. I mean, usually the study abroad, they can work out my classes, which is really nice for my curriculum. So I get an opportunity to get done what I need to get done, but also get to know the different cultures and really expand myself in that way. So that's been really great for my education so far.
Excellent. Now, for purposes of this specific vlog and podcast, we were going to focus on Ireland. Is that correct?
Belize.
Oh, Belize. I'm so sorry. We'll do Ireland at a different time. So we'll focus on Belize this time because I think that was the most current one, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So talk to me a little bit about Belize. Where did we decide to go in there, and what was the pre-planning vacation timeline for that? How long did you have to plan in advance to take that trip?
Okay, sure, yeah. So this trip was through my school's campus ministry group. They do a lot of different service work because we're a mercy school. So typically when we apply for these kind of things, it takes about 6 months to get the ball rolling. So about that is when I started to apply. Excuse me.
It's okay.
Pretty much with that, they handle the itinerary and tell us where to go and when, how to get there. Pretty much we just apply and then we try to show up on time on the day of.
Well, it sounds like they handle a lot of the stuff in the back, and so that's that's really good for you. How long have they been doing these types of travels? Are you aware of how long they've been doing this travel abroad program for at your school?
Yeah, so we go through a girl named Lindsay. She's one that handles everything at our school. And I think she's been there for around 12 years or so, but in the last probably 5 years, they've added a lot of new programs that a lot of students hadn't had the opportunity to do before. So we've really been going for it lately. It's been awesome.
That's really, really great. Especially, and there's really two schools of thought that I hear a lot from people who have to kind of get the travel bug. Sometimes they are like, well, when I'm young, I want to travel because now I have the opportunity to do it, and when I'm older, I might not. And then there's those that are on the flip side of it, where they're like, okay, well now that I'm retired, I'm 65, 70 years old. Now I want to be able to travel, that I have more time. So I'm not sure kind of if you've heard this from even your relatives as far as where their position is on stuff like that, because I don't know that we have a lot of our relatives that have done a lot of extensive traveling. I think you and I are probably, and for those who don't know, Keana's by marriage. So I don't know that we've had a lot of our relatives that have really done a lot of extensive traveling. Are you familiar with any?
Not really. I mean, I'm thinking about my parents, and there's so much I'm going to travel when I retire category. And then there's me that were like, oh my goodness, be safe. And now they're like, oh, where are you going now? Because I just travel so much.
Well, and would you say that you kind of have a little bit of the travel bug now? Do you want to go to additional places as you continue, even after school?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to do travel outside of my education because although that's been a great opportunity for me, I've done a lot of like heavy education where I would rather, be able to go out and do what I want, explore more, not so much on the weekends, even just like take a week, let's go. So I'm excited to really get that different feel for it, which is going to be great. So I'm excited.
That's awesome, Keana. So when planning to go to Belize, I need to know a little bit more about the location because I'm not too terribly familiar with it. Did you need any type of a visa when you're traveling there, or special travel medications, anything that, maybe to adjust your diet plans ahead of time, anything like that?
Not really so much. The only thing that I really was concerned about before I left was different immunizations that I would typically need before I go down there because it's a South American country. So I went to my primary care to see what I needed. They recommended like 1 or 2 vaccines. Nothing that was really a priority for me to go, so I ended up not getting anything.
Okay.
It's really good to check before you go anywhere in South America just for that reason. But other than that, really, it was just going for it.
No, that's okay. And for my students who aren't familiar with this, especially when you're traveling to destinations where there might be, really harsher climates or a little bit of an unusual situation. Like, for example, later on this next year, I might be going to both India and Africa. And if that is the case, I know that there's concerns over things like malaria. So I might have to go to my HMO, and they may actually refer me to a visiting doctor or a travel doctor in order to be able to get those immunizations like you were talking about. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah. So let's talk about the actual vacation pre-planning and packing of the whole thing. What did you have to pre-plan for? I mean, like, what was the weather down there, and what were some of the things that you decided to pack as you went on this journey?
Sure, yeah. So I packed super light, like overwhelmingly light. Probably should have packed more. Typically, it's so hot down there and humid, so definitely wear shorts and tank tops and t-shirts. I don't think I wore 1 pair of longer pants and shorts. That being said, definitely bring your own like sunscreen just because they really don't sell that down there. I think just because the locals don't need it. But I definitely got burnt to a crisp on this vacation.
Oh, poor thing.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. So you're recommending, how did you get I was going to say, how do you get away with like a larger amount of something like that? Because I would think normally when you're traveling through the airports, they only allow you to bring like a 3.5 ounce bottle of stuff. How can you get maybe more if you were?
Yeah, so we traveled as a group, and then we ended up paying for 1 checked bag, and in those checked bags you can have larger amounts of liquids. So that's what we did. We brought a lot of sunscreen that we all just compiled into 1 checked bag that we all, I think, put in like $5 for. It really wasn't that even expensive to bring that bag with us, and that really helped us out in the long run with like shampoo and everything as well.
Perfect. Okay. So which airport did you decide to leave out of?
We left out of Philadelphia.
Okay. So when you're leaving out of Philly, what was the parking situation? Because I don't know how long this trip was for you when you went down to Belize.
Yeah, I think we were there like 9 days, and getting to the airport was probably like the most like challenging thing to coordinate because our school's like, good luck getting there, and we're like, great, okay. So I had a friend that was going with me, and I was dropped off at his house, which is I think in Pittston area, and then he drove us down to Philly, and we ended up parking. There's this one street next to Widener University that has surveillance 24/7, but the public's allowed to park there. So we parked the car there, and then we took an Uber from there to an apartment that his friend had, so we could sleep for like 2 hours. I don't even know why we went.
Wow.
So then we took another Uber later after we woke up to the airport, and then everything was good. We got there like 10 minutes late. It was chaos. Everybody's running around, but definitely parking at the university was like the best decision that we made just for his vehicle. Didn't have to pay the outrageous parking at the airport. So like it worked out well. It was just a little chaotic.
For those of my viewers who are wondering, yes, Keana is under the age of 30, so she probably has a little bit more energy and can stay up and have those 2 hours of sleep than some of us who are a little bit older. So just giving them a little foresight on that type of thing. So
I don't sleep, so
welcome to my world. It's like I have that energy, and caffeine really helps me out a lot. So let's talk a little bit about the flights. So which airline did you decide to go with on the way down there?
Okay, so we had to go through a travel agent just because of our school situation, and we went through American Airlines, I believe.
Okay, perfect. And I'm assuming that you all did coach, unless someone's magically got some kind of upgrade or something like that.
Yeah, the bare basics, man. Like, no luxury at my school, absolutely not.
That's okay. And how many people did you have going on the same flight? Do you remember?
I think there's probably around 12 of us. It was a decent sized group that we got, and we all sat in the same area, which was great as well.
Okay, cool, awesome. So nobody got left out. You all got off the flight together. Did you have any connecting flights anywhere along the way, or was it a direct flight from Philly to Belize?
Yeah, we had to stop in Texas, I believe, but we were only there for like 2 hours, maybe.
Oh, that's not a bad layup.
It was really nice.
I'm sure we both had far worse as we've done our traveling. So.
Oh my gosh, yeah, the layovers are awful.
Okay, so you're now down in Belize. Now, because you didn't have any pre-vacation destination locations, we're going to skip that portion. But I want to know a little bit about the accommodations when you're going through a school. Are you staying at like a host home, or were you staying at a hotel? What was the situation like?
Yeah, so we were met at the airport by two women, which were from Cornerstone University, or not university. I think they're just a nonprofit down in Belize. So they came and met us and took us to a guest home that they have, and we all stayed in there. So we had like it was almost like a hostel kind of setup. So there was like 12 girls in one area, and then we had like a boy with us that got his own little private room, which I was jealous of. But typically it was like a twin bed per person, and then we all had like a fan directly on us, which was like our saving grace. It was so hot and horrible to sleep in if you don't have a fan.
I will say this, when we're traveling to some of the more humid locations that we do end up traveling to, like Keana was saying, you really want to pack smart. We've been to, like recently you were where we went on a cruise to the Mediterranean, and there were days when it was 75% humidity in some locations. But I would say probably the worst humidity we've ever had is when we went to Bangkok back in 2016, and it was about 85% humidity then. We were packed ahead of time with both linen clothing as well as gauze, because that tends to absorb the water or your sweat, unfortunately. I mean, it's kind of gross, but at the same time, you're not a mess when you get out of the shower and have to put on that clothing all of a sudden. So to my students, I say, like Keana was saying, either pack shorts and think in terms of the weather situation. Did you bring any, I'm assuming, mosquito repellent or anything like that?
I actually forgot all of everything, so I was relying on everyone else. And I know, like, when we were out and about, there was one person that brought the bug spray, and everybody was like clinging to them because
you're my friend. That person was the most popular person in the entire
honestly.
Great job. Okay, so here's the part where I'm going to let you take over a little bit, because I want to know about the different locations that you went to. Were you just in one city? Did you go to multiple cities? And maybe let's focus on one thing you did at each location that you decided to do during those 9 days.
Sure, yeah. So our school planned out the itinerary for us, which actually pretty much got thrown out the window as of day one. So we really were just going for it. Some of the locations got a little foggy of where we were going, just because the culture there is much like, oh, I'm just going to take you to this place that I know. Here's this local wherever. And we're like, okay. Some of the places that I do know that we went was a place called Mariposa, which is like this weird vegan retreat that we weren't even expecting to go to. And this is like the weirdest experience for everyone, because we had no idea what was going on. We like get out of our van, and then there's another van that pulls up next to us, and like all of these like really hardcore vegans like pile out of this van and make like this unity circle around us, and are like freaking out. It was so funny.
Wow, okay,
so funny,
that's uncomfortable, but
it was so interesting. I don't know, but like I actually don't eat meat, so I was like initiated into this group of people, and they were like so excited. It was so funny, but it was a great experience what we got going. We had like this yoga studio thing that we went to and did all this like self-care. It was great. Not planned at all, but it's some of the other stuff that we did. So the culture down there is very I'd say like alternative medicine, a lot of like Mayan culture. So we ended up seeing a shaman, which was crazy. This Mayan shaman. It was a place called, I think, Garcia Sisters. And she like did this ritual for us, and we like did like energy cleanse, and that was the coolest thing because I'm very much into like alternative medicine as well. So it was like really cool just to like see her do her thing. And she's like this cute old woman. She didn't wear shoes. Beautiful.
Aww.
I know. Oh my god, it was so cute. And then we did some of like the basic touristy stuff. We went to, I think it's, I always pronounce this wrong, Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Maybe. It's a Mayan ruin, but I think it's either the biggest or second biggest ruin there, and you can like actually climb up some of the old structures and like look over what it would have been like the community there at the time. And we had a great tour guide that I think he had Mayan heritage as well. So he had like all the background knowledge that we wouldn't have had if we didn't have him. So I highly recommend if you go there to get one of their tour guides, just because they have all this history that we wouldn't have even been able to touch without them.
You know what? I was going to ask you, how does it seem as though does it seem like a lot of the places that you went had some level of protection, or did it seem like they had been raided and there was a lot of ruins that were really demolished over time? Like, what was your impression of that?
So I feel like because the locals cling so much to their heritage, a lot of it got preserved, which is fabulous. I know Saskatchewan that we went to, I think was one of the best preserved ones there. But we did drive by at one point one of the more local, smaller ruins as well. And even that, really, you can see a lot of the different structures that were there. I mean, of course, a long time, there's different wars and whatnot that happened that ended up converting some of it. But they really preserved the majority of the ruins, which is wonderful and really unexpected, honestly.
Yeah, I know when we went to Bangkok, and I've had friends who have gone over to Cambodia and to places, to ruins like Angkor Wat and stuff like that. You're really amazed by how ancient some of these locations are, especially when, like for me, I've lived in California most of my life, and the oldest buildings here are maybe 100 years old. Then when you move to the East Coast, or when you're visiting the East Coast, you see buildings that are a couple of 100 years old, and you're like, wow, that's really, really old now. And then you go to Europe or other places where you see places that are maybe 1,000 years old, but some of these ruins, like Mayan ruins, are maybe even much older than that. And so just to see some of that stuff, it's almost like you're participating in history at that moment, and it's a really unique experience. It's very different, and it's very interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was crazy. I think that was probably like one of the most memorable places that I have been to, just because of all of the energy of the place, and you could really connect with the civilization that was there. And everybody was so respectful and just passionate about their heritage. And it was just really beautiful to experience. So
how is the food, by the way, down there?
Great. So like, I don't eat meat, and I know when I've traveled before, I've had difficulty with that, but they were so accommodating, especially because we went to like these weird vegan places.
There you go. Just made perfectly for you. So there you go.
It was so funny. But we had, I would say we had like 2 authentic local meals. One of them we had at that shaman place that we went to. But at the Cornerstone Foundation that we stayed at, they typically got us like different takeout type meals. And like, it was weird. Sometimes it was like Indian, and I'm like, this is a little upsetting. But there was a few times that we actually got like true meals from down there, which was nice.
Well, excellent. And like, what were some of the other locations you went to down there? Or was it pretty much during the 9 days, those were the areas you just focused on the whole time?
We went a few more places. We went to this Botanical Gardens. There's so many down there. I couldn't even come to figure out which one we went to, but they were huge. A lot of knowledgeable people down there as well about like the different plants, just because of that alternative medicine type of culture. I think that was really cool as well. I saw my first banana tree, which was life-changing, must I add. Yeah. It was great. And then we actually did this really cool, it was like a canoeing trip down the McCall River, and that was awesome. I didn't see any monkeys though, and supposedly there's a lot of monkeys down there, so that was upsetting. But that just gives me reason to go back to see the monkeys. So.
Well, I mean, the concern I think a lot of people have is when they're going into South America, and the rivers there are very dark, so you don't know whether or not there's certain wild animals in the water that might be a little more perilous for you, like a python or alligator or even piranha in some cases. Was there a warning on anything like that?
Oh gosh. And now that you say this is really funny. The locals were like, get in the water, come in the water. And everybody gets into the rivers to cool down at the end of the day. It's like a tradition down there as well. So we were in the water a majority of the time, and this thought didn't even cross my mind. That's so funny. But there really was no concern by the locals of anything going on. And really, I didn't feel like anxious about it at all. And the water was really clean. So we didn't have any issues, which is great.
That's okay. It might just be restricted to things like the Amazon and other rivers that might be in the area. So again, not an issue there. So, okay, great. And what was the, for purposes of the schooling and the actual rationale when you went down there, did you have to do any field work while you were down there, or was there anything that you had to do on an academic front while you were down there?
Yeah, so this trip was more service-based, not so much like educational-based.
Okay.
So some of the service that we did was, there's like a predominant HIV epidemic that goes on. Mainly in Belize, they have quite a large population of people with HIV. So we did a lot of like education, and we went in to see some of the school students that were down there. And it's really great to connect with them, just because I don't think a lot of people are, able to reach that population. So going in there and like having a lot of the people that went had like a biology background, some sort of science background. So to share our knowledge with them was fabulous. Other things that we did was we cleaned up a lot of local parks. People from Belize definitely like to party, and there was a lot of different parks that we cleaned up after like celebrations that they had. So it was kind of nice just to like revitalize their parks after they had like holiday and whatnot. We also made a mural on one of their walls. Like there's a famous wall that Cornerstone has, and usually groups that go there have different like HIV awareness information on that wall. So we added our mark to the city there. So if you go, please look for it.
That sounds awesome. You guys do some amazing work. That was really lovely.
Yeah, it was a great time. And I definitely feel like the service trips are a different feeling than when I did study abroad, just because everyone's so interconnected on these kind of things. And I definitely recommend, if you go travel, to definitely try to immerse yourself in the culture. I just think it will completely change your experience no matter where you are.
If I could take a moment to comment on that, because I was listening to another travel podcast. A gentleman by the name of Dunn Parker does a cruising podcast. That's really fantastic. And for anybody who's out there, I highly recommend it, where he talks with people about various different trips that they go on. And recently he had spoken with someone who had gone on I think it was a Carnival cruise down to the Bahamas, which, as I'm sure as you are aware, was recently ravaged by a hurricane. And so the city of Freeport, which is a normal destination in the Bahamas, was just hit really hard by the hurricane. So when they went, they noticed that the ship was not as populated as you would have on a normal cruise. But the people who were on board, whether they were from church groups or whether they were from other service groups, or whether they were people who were just vacationing and wanted to go there, they were really interested, at least with the Bahamas one, with just, I'm going down there, I'm going to bring stuff to donate, I'm going to spend my money down there, so that way I'm utilizing my money to help influence the economy, just buying what trinkets I can, using the services I can. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that when you do stuff like that, when you help out those communities, it really does help to not only ingratiate the cultural exchange that we all have, but at the same time, it's also working within the confines of those cultures in order to help share their story abroad. And so I think that's a great opportunity, and I'm so proud of you for having engaged in that at such a young age. I mean, again, I know you're very modest, but I really appreciate the fact that you do that at this age. So I much appreciate it. So.
Thank you.
So I gush over Keana, and she knows it. So, but that's all. That's me.
I gush over him too. So.
So okay. So now we're talking about the return to the States. You've been down there for a 9-day period. You've had some good food, great relationships, done some really good educational pieces, and been able to share yourself as a resource down there. So talk to me about the return trip back into the States. What was that like?
Sure, yeah. So it wasn't definitely not the worst return experience I've ever had. The only issue that we really ran into was everybody wanted to buy their like authentic alcohol, and when we were trying to get those duty-free bags, it was like chaos trying to like find the place that had the duty-free bags. But once we got through that, it was good. And I know, I think we came back into Miami, and they had to do like our luggage check there first. And I know there was issues like trying to get through their security in time to make our connecting flight back to Philly. We ended up being okay, but it was just like an overwhelming amount of us trying to get through, I think. And that really like held us up a little bit, and everybody had to swab their alcohol bags, of course. Like,
Oh, gosh.
so, yeah, but we made it through and it was okay. And, you know, all things being said, definitely not the worst experience I've had trying to come home. So.
Actually, I wanted to ask you, do you have either global entry or do you have like passport on demand, anything like that?
No, I have the basics of the basics.
That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
I know with many of the people I've interviewed for this, they've actually told me that they've gone through the purchase and the interview with Department of Homeland Security for global entry. Personally, I like it, but then I don't know how Philly compares to LAX, but LAX is almost a city unto itself as far as an airport goes. It's massive. And so when you're normally going through and returning through customs, that process can be somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour. But then I got this global entry. And again, you have to sit with the Department of Homeland Security and you do an interview through that process. And now it takes me maybe 15 minutes to go through customs. So in my opinion, it's worth it. But again, you know, depending upon the nature of how much you travel, where you travel to, it can be definitely a very interesting process, I would say. And maybe it's not the most affordable for people. It's like $150 for 5 years. But again, depending upon the nature of what your situation is, it could be a good investment depending on how much you travel. So let's get into some takeaways. So what were the pros of Belize? What were some of the advantages, and what did you take away as a really good opportunity down there?
Yeah, so this trip was like much different than anything I've ever experienced. I think the greatest part of it was the connection with the earth, which like I'm all hippie. I love any kind of alternative medicine, any culture that, you know, really utilizes its resources and is passionate about the earth in general. So I think having that kind of perspective just from the locals was really interesting, and like learning their knowledge of the planet that's completely different than mine. Also, just like the extensive opportunities in Belize. There's so much that we didn't even get to do. There's amazing caves down there. There's like a backpacker's paradise island that's like super interesting. And, you know, I just feel like there's so much packed into this one place that there's ample opportunity to really, you know, explore it to the depths that, you know, I scratched the surface. So it's just really exciting to think of how many possibilities there are down there.
Would you go back?
Oh my gosh, in a heartbeat. One of the coolest vacations I've ever taken.
So not that I want to say that there are cons to any of the trips that we go on, because traveling on its own is a pretty big gift to be able to do. But what would be some things that you'd want a first-time traveler to Belize want to know about?
Yeah, so as always, you know, we're used to the hustle and bustle of the United States. And when you go to other countries, especially Belize, the transportation can get a little sketchy. When we first got there, our van actually broke down just because we had so much weight from our luggage. But, you know, I think it's kind of like similar to the Italian culture, where you just take your time, you take it as it is, and, you know, you really incorporate that into your experience, just because we are such a fast-paced culture, and to slow down is important. So not, like I said, not necessarily a con, but definitely like a change of pace.
Yeah, just to be aware.
You'd expect that, yeah.
I know in Europe, and you probably experienced this in the Southern Europe when you went to Italy, they have like the kind of midday break in some of the more rural locations, not necessarily in the bigger of the cities because they have so much tourism, but was that anything that you experienced when you were in South America at all? Any type of a large day break for something like that? Or
The only thing I can really think of was they had like this like unwritten rule, I guess, that you can only get water from their fill-up stations until like a certain time of day. And if you don't get water, you just don't get water for the day until, you know, late into the night, just based on supply because it's so hot down there. So I know like one day we like missed the cutoff by like 10 minutes and we went without water for like the majority of the day. But like I said, there's ample opportunity to like get different supplies. Like we were, I think, 5-minute walk from different grocery stores that you can get these kind of things. But that's like the one thing that I noticed was their culture around water and the preservation of that water. So that's just something that they expect you to live around, even though, you know, we pretty much take it for granted just because we have so much more like resource for water in the States.
And that's another thing in reference to, not a lot of people know about this because they think in terms, oh, it's only like 80 degrees or 85 degrees. You wouldn't think that water would be too big of an issue, but you got to also remember the humidity will like suck the water and suck you dry. It can be really dangerous. So having an ample supply of water, whether you're in a desert or whether you're in a much more humid climate, is really important, I would think. So absolutely. Now, any other things that you would like to add to the trip as far as some value adds for the first-time traveler or cost savings, any best practices they should be aware of?
Yeah, so the great thing about Belize is that most of like the trinkets and stuff that you can bring home are like handmade by the locals, sold in like a little, almost like a farmer's market type setup. So definitely bring cash if you want to buy those kind of things. And it was really inexpensive. I spend probably only like $50 tops on like the entirety of the trip, just because everything was so affordable.
Wow.
And the quality of it's great. Yeah, it was crazy. I bought a decent amount of like trinkets to bring home, and you know, it was great quality. It was not expensive. It's really everything that they sell is pretty much encompasses the culture, which I like. It's not necessarily one of those made on a production line type of places. It's really like authentic, handmade kind of stuff. So definitely bring cash and look for those like pieces that really encompass the area, just because there's so many great things that you can find down there.
And did you feel safe within that location? I mean, you're obviously a younger lady traveling. I mean, was there a concern about safety?
Not really. Like I felt really comfortable. The only times I didn't was like when you're walking on the street, but I mean, it's the same stuff we get at home, you know, and definitely just travel and, you know, 2 or more people in a group. But really, it really wasn't a concern for me. The people down there are really great. They love having visitors. They love sharing their culture. And, you know, I think that really shone through. So
wonderful. Well, Keana, again, I want to thank you very much for doing this interview with me. I know that my students will get a lot from this. Now, if people wanted to contact you, what is the best way for them to reach you? Is it through email? Is it through Instagram? What's the best way?
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely on Instagram the most. So definitely feel free to message me on there anytime. You can see a lot of my different travel photos on there as well. I share on there quite frequently. So definitely reach out. You can see my information listed there, and I'll definitely get back to you. So feel free to contact me.
And for those who are on the podcast, the Instagram handle is the_wind_cries_Keana, spelled Keana. Will you come and do another one of these interviews in the relative future? I'd love to know more about some of your other travels, especially Ireland. I'm really excited about that one too.
Absolutely. And actually I have some more planned trips this coming year. So really we have plenty of topics to cover. How exciting.
Oh my gosh. That's going to be amazing. I want to definitely hear all about them. So again, thank you so much. And again, to my students out there, I want to thank you so very much for listening. If you have any questions, any comments that you would like to bring up, you can always reach me at scott@theprofessortravel.com. Until next time, though, make every day a wonderful adventure and make every day the opportunity to have a travel adventure. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.